It was the kind of quiet night that made every highway seem endless, until one flight changed everything. Thousands of vehicles had traveled this road before. Tonight would be different. Far above the sleeping city, a private jet was approaching its destination. On board were 6 people, expecting nothing more than a routine landing. The aircraft had departed from Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, and was bound for Austin. For most of the flight, everything appeared normal. But as the jet approached Laredo, subtle signs of trouble began to emerge. Minutes before landing, the pilots contacted air traffic control.
They reported mechanical problems and concerns about fuel.
Controllers immediately began preparing for an emergency arrival. Meanwhile, witnesses below noticed something unusual. The jet's lights appeared to flicker as it descended. Something was clearly wrong. Then, in a matter of seconds, the situation became catastrophic. Highway lights rushed toward the windshield like a wall of fire. A fireball erupted across the roadway. Flames lit up the sky as shocked drivers slammed on their brakes. For a few moments, nobody understood what they had just seen. Some thought it was a truck explosion. Others feared a terrorist attack. The wreckage slid across the pavement, scattering twisted metal and burning fuel across multiple lanes. Yet somehow, movement could still be seen inside the burning aircraft. Without hesitation, ordinary people rushed toward the flames. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for help. They knew every second counted. The aircraft could explode again at any moment. Through thick smoke and intense heat, they began breaking windows and forcing open exits. Then the first survivor emerged from the wreckage. Bruised, disoriented, and covered in smoke, the survivor collapsed onto the highway. But there were still others trapped inside. Within minutes, the glow of emergency lights painted the night sky red and blue. Firefighters, police officers, and paramedics raced toward the inferno, knowing lives were still hanging in the balance. When firefighters arrived, they were met by a scene of absolute devastation. Burning fuel covered sections of the roadway, while twisted aircraft wreckage continued to crackle in the heat. Despite the danger, rescuers pushed forward. Every second spent hesitating could mean losing another life. Inside the shattered cabin, cries for help echoed through the smoke. Survivors were trapped among broken seats, twisted metal, and shattered glass. Applause broke out among bystanders. Against all odds, more people were making it out alive. But rescuers knew their work wasn't finished. Still, one firefighter made the decision to go back in. Seconds felt like minutes. Nobody knew if he would find another survivor or become trapped himself. Then suddenly, movement appeared through the smoke. The firefighter emerged carrying the final survivor.
Final survivor is clear!
The crowd erupted with relief as another life was saved. As emergency crews completed their search, a heartbreaking discovery was made. One passenger had not survived. That passenger was Joshua Baer, a respected entrepreneur whose influence stretched across the entire Austin technology community. As dawn approached over South Texas, the flames had finally been extinguished. That victim was Joshua Baer, a prominent entrepreneur and investor widely recognized as one of the most influential figures in Austin's startup ecosystem. For decades, he had helped launch companies, mentor founders, and build one of America's fastest-growing technology communities. To many young entrepreneurs, Joshua Baer wasn't simply a businessman. He was a mentor, an advisor, and a symbol of possibility. Now, the same community he helped build was waking up to shocking headlines and heartbreaking news alerts. By sunrise, television stations across America had interrupted their regular programming. The crash had become national news. Helicopters hovered above the scene while reporters gathered along the highway, documenting every detail they could see. Viewers watched dramatic footage of blackened wreckage scattered across the roadway. Burned metal, shattered components, and a destroyed light pole painted a picture of immense force. Questions immediately began to emerge. How could a modern business jet end up crashing onto a busy highway just minutes before landing? To answer those questions, federal investigators were dispatched to Laredo. Every piece of wreckage would soon become part of a much larger puzzle. The National Transportation Safety Board, better known as the NTSB, quickly assumed responsibility for the investigation. Specialists carefully photographed debris, mapped impact points, and searched for any clue that might explain the aircraft's final moments. At the same time, federal agents and aviation experts began reviewing communication records between the pilots and air traffic controllers. Among the most important clues was a distress call made only minutes before the crash. Those final words would become critical evidence. According to preliminary reports, the crew had warned of fuel concerns and mechanical difficulties. Investigators now faced a crucial question: what exactly happened in those final minutes? As investigators reconstructed the jet's final journey, attention quickly turned to a chilling radio transmission made only minutes before impact. It would become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire case. On that recording, the pilots calmly reported mechanical difficulties, but beneath their professional tone, investigators sensed growing urgency. Every word was carefully analyzed. Every pause, every response, every background sound could potentially reveal what was happening inside the aircraft. Then another detail emerged. Reports suggested the crew had expressed concern about fuel levels shortly before the crash. Fuel exhaustion is one of aviation's most feared emergencies. Investigators began calculating distances, fuel burn rates, weather conditions, and flight planning data to determine whether the aircraft should have had enough fuel to complete its journey. Or was there another problem hidden somewhere within the aircraft's systems? Meanwhile, radar data provided a detailed picture of the jet's final moments in the air. The flight path appeared increasingly unstable. Altitude fluctuated. Speed changed unexpectedly. Something was clearly affecting the aircraft's performance. To investigators, these irregular movements suggested a crew struggling to maintain control under rapidly deteriorating conditions. While experts searched for answers, the internet had already begun forming its own conclusions. Videos of the burning wreckage spread across social platforms within hours. Millions watched the dramatic rescue footage. Alongside sympathy and support came speculation. Some users questioned the fuel explanation. Others suggested hidden mechanical failures. At this stage, investigators had only fragments of the truth. The wreckage held secrets, the data raised questions, and the final answers remained frustratingly out of reach. As investigators worked quietly behind the scenes, a very different investigation was unfolding online. Millions of people were now analyzing the crash, frame by frame, searching for clues the experts might have missed. Some viewers focused on the flickering aircraft lights. Others pointed to the unusual flight path captured by radar. Every image became fuel for speculation. Days after the crash, investigators returned to the wreckage with one goal: discover what caused the aircraft's final descent. Every damaged component was carefully collected, photographed, and examined for clues. The wreckage told a story of a flight that had been fighting to stay airborne. Investigators compared radar tracks, cockpit communications, and aircraft performance data. Records suggested the aircraft may have been operating with dangerously limited fuel reserves during the final stage of the flight. Without fuel, engines cannot produce power. And without power, even the most advanced aircraft becomes increasingly difficult to control. The radar data, cockpit communications, and wreckage evidence were all pointing toward the same conclusion. After days of analysis, investigators believed they had finally identified the chain of events that led to disaster. By now, investigators believed the crew was facing a catastrophic loss of power. Yet even in those final moments, the pilots refused to give up. With altitude disappearing and options running out, the crew searched desperately for any place where they could bring the aircraft down. Investigators later noted that the aircraft narrowly avoided densely populated areas during its final descent. Had the jet come down only moments earlier, or in a different location, the outcome could have been far worse. In the midst of disaster, a tragedy that could have claimed dozens of lives was limited to a single devastating loss. In the days that followed, one fact continued to amaze investigators. Against overwhelming odds, 5 of the 6 people aboard had survived. Many experts believed the outcome could have been far worse. Quick actions by the crew, rescuers, and ordinary citizens helped save precious lives. Yet amid the stories of survival, one loss continued to be felt across Texas and beyond. Joshua Bear's final journey had come to an unexpected end. The wreckage would eventually be cleared. The investigation would find answers, but the events of that night would never be forgotten by those who witnessed them. One life was lost, 5 survived. A routine flight became a tragedy, and a highway became a symbol of courage. Because sometimes, in humanity's darkest moments, its brightest qualities shine through.